you can get yourself an education. You can work with your back like your father. And secondly, don't ever work for money. Always do the very best job you can, and the money will always follow. And he says, always, always have respect for people. And remember, do things the way, and it's almost biblical from the standpoint, treat people the way you want to be treated, with respect.
Welcome to Your Next Big Project is You, a podcast based around the theme of time. Time to be able to press pause on life. Time to reevaluate what's important. Time to reminisce about where you've come from, what you've learned, and what you've accomplished. Time to revisit your goals, dreams, and vision. And time to remember the people in your life. That's it, my friends. If you've got time, fasten your seatbelt and listen in as we discuss opportunities for the next 5 to 25 years of your life. And remember, your next big project is you. Welcome to our podcast. Your next big project is you. And what a special guest I have today. It's tough to put into words when you have a friendship like I have with David Elias, who I'm privileged to have here today. David is an amazing person in many realms. Is a great husband, is a father, is a grandfather, is a former entrepreneur, and still doing amazing work, assisting others. More importantly, he's been one of the most valued friends in my life and a true mentor to me. Someone that I was privileged to work with, my gosh, well over 35 years ago when we first met. David, I can't thank you enough for joining me today. Thanks for joining the podcast.
Well, it's a profound privilege to be here with you, Leo, and you flatter me, and I wish you would tell that to my wife, Barbara.
I know who makes the decisions in your house, my friend.
Listen, my wife is definitely the boss, and I have two daughters, Kristen and Kelly, that are following in her footsteps. So I just do what I'm told.
I know who to call if I need to get something done with you. I can tell you that. Well, listen, let's start here. What an amazing career you've had, David. A life journey from a banking background to starting your own asset management company in 1979. Tell us about that journey, how your entrepreneurial instincts came into play to start your own company back then.
If I could just go back even farther than that or further than that, is when I was in my teens. I was about 15, 16 years old, and I got interested in the stock market when most of my buddies were collecting baseball cards of Mickey Mantle, Roger Maris, and some others. My dad was a janitor, and I told my father I wanted to buy some stocks. And he says, with what? And he knew a fellow named Mike Michaels at Loeb Roads, which was an old line firm, and told me about how to do it. And what I ended up doing is mowing lawns in the summertime, shoveling walks during the winter, and having a paper route, and saved about $1,000. And I bought, my first stock was 10 shares of AT&T, which was $100 a share. And the only reason I bought that is my sister was a telephone operator with New York Tel. And as they say, the rest is history. And I ended up becoming a stockbroker shortly after getting out of college in the early 70s with a firm called Horn, Laurel, Weeks, Hempel, and Noyes. And they told me when they approached me to work for them that I was going to learn how to manage money and I was going to become an analyst. It was really, well, the main purpose was to be in sales. And a good friend of mine, Ed Muth, was the investment leader at Marine Midland Bank, and told me he knew I wasn't happy in being a stockbroker. Would I like to come over and be a portfolio manager and investment advisor with Marine? That's where I learned the really fundamentals of analysis, how to manage a portfolio, and also how to really service clients.
Yeah. You know what? It was interesting, though. You quickly mentioned your dad as a janitor and growing up, and you not only learned portfolio management, the investment world, and how to help people to think through their wealth management aspirations and their goals, but when you and I compared notes, it's funny when we met many years ago, both blue collar backgrounds, you Geneva, New York, me Avon, New York. Our dads were both janitors to do this. And the other thing I've admired about you is a commitment to client service and excellence. And I'm wondering how much of that from your dad, just being a common folk like my parents, of teaching us core values of how to take care of people, just doing our work, doing good work and helping others. And you were ahead of your game by my standards in taking care of people, building lifetime relationships. So that in your case, I saw it firsthand. Your clients became some of your closest friends, even to this day when you're not even in the business. What was some of your magic elixir that you think is a part of that from growing up, or just things that you started to build into your client service approach?
I think what my father gave me, I borrowed this phrase from you. Our inheritance, you and I got, were values. We might not have gotten a lot of inheritance in dollars and cents, but what's that expression? Give a person a piece of fish and you feed them for a day, but if you teach them how to fish, you teach them for a lifetime. I was less than a model student in high school, and a couple of times I was asked not to come back. And my father, one morning at 6 o'clock on a Saturday morning, woke me up and told me to get in his car and took me to the elementary school. He was the janitor and taught me how to wash toilets. And for the rest of the school year, I did that every Saturday. And I kept saying to him, when am I going to get paid? When am I going to get paid? He said, I'm going to pay you when the time is right. So after the first weekend after school was out for the summer, we sat in his little office in the basement of the school. He said, I'm going to pay you now. And all I could see was dollar signs ringing up in my eyes, because I knew all the Saturdays I spent doing that. And here was my pay. You can get yourself an education. You can work with your back like your father. And secondly, don't ever work for money. Always do the very best job you can, and the money will always follow. And he says, always, always have respect for people. And remember, do things the way, and it's almost biblical from the standpoint, treat people the way you want to be treated, with respect. And that was my inheritance. And my father was absolutely right. And, our mutual friend, Jim Gould, a couple of times said to me, he says, you're about the only person I've ever worked with that never was worried about the paycheck. You never talked about what you made or not. And I said, because Jim, I knew if I did the job, and I told him the story, what I just told you, and it's been true. And our parents, both our parents gave us real values, Leo. And people, and the other thing too, and years later, I read this in a medical report that why some doctors are sued and some aren't. And three major insurance companies that did malpractice did 10-year studies, and they found out when the patient, even though the doctor might have made a mistake or didn't do what needed to be done the right way, it was an honest mistake, okay? If they felt the doctors cared about them, they didn't sue them. When they felt that they were nothing more than a number, they sued. And I've always felt, and you were a prime example of this when we worked together at Elias Asset Management. We cared about our clients, and they knew it. And it really make me proud when you tell me about the friendships. To this day, even though I'm not fully employed in the investment field, some of my best friends today, after 30 and 40 years, we're still friends from the days we worked together as client and advisor.
Yeah. I marveled at just being by your side there, traveling around North America with you many years ago, having a lot of fun, laughs, also assisting a lot of people to take their businesses to the next level by learning how to integrate the concepts of managed money into their books of businesses and things like this. The other things, and I hadn't even planned to ask you this question, David, the thing that was really cool being by your side for many years was watching the notoriety around people wanting your advice, people wanting to know how you were feeling about things. You elevated your game, out of beautiful Buffalo to a global perspective. You were one of the ones in our beautiful community here that became myopic. I mean, you were constantly going down to New York, and every major news, outlet wanted to get your perspective on the markets and politics and the economy. You were writing for Town and Country and Physicians Assets and every Wall Street Journal, the Time, you name every. I could just list things. It would take me probably the rest of this podcast of all the places that you've been quoted and interviewed and things. How did that start to take off for people wondering how to build their brand? From what you learned back then, you were fearless. You were just out there. A lot of people were under the radar, but you did it in a perfect way of balancing people knowing how much you cared about them, but also there was this request coming in from the broader marketplace wanting to know how the heck you were feeling about things. What was the magic quotient there? What do you think brought all that about?
I think that probably the biggest thing is that there was nothing sophisticated about my approach to the markets. We always like to buy blue chip companies, what I would call face of the earth companies, 100-year-old companies like General Electric, Exxon, Johnson and Johnson, that survived world wars, depressions, presidents being assassinated, all sorts of major events in the world, that they were able to survive them. And we bought names that people could be comfortable with. And the other thing is, we really got to know our customers. One of the things that when I was with Hornblower Weeks, I'll never, ever forget this. When I was in training there for 6 months on Wall Street in their corporate offices, every morning before our classes started, without fail, they said, know your customer. Get to know your customer. And you got to remember, in those days, we didn't have money market. So if Leo Pozzieri called me up and wanted to buy 100 shares of IBM, I had to know that you were going to send the check in. Because if you didn't send the check in, guess who had to come up with the money? I did. And then when we sold your stock, we sent the check out. So you had to really know, trust, and know that your customer was somebody you wanted to do business with.
Yeah.
And also, I was very fortunate. I had some great mentors over the years. One of my mentors was Jack Cano, who's here in Buffalo, that started a company called Connex Corporation, which is still in there. He spent many hours with me talking about how to run a business and what it takes to build a business and a reputation. You know, my friend Monsignor Clancy, who was, one of the top priests in the Vatican and everything over, all about caring about people. And I've been very, very blessed with all the mentors I've had. And you, in your own way, don't realize it sometimes. I'm quoting you constantly. And like, as I said earlier, our parents might not give us inheritance of money, but they gave us values. And I would tell both my daughters, when they would tell me they were in love with somebody or anything else, I said, love is a wonderful thing, but do you have the same values?
Yeah. Very true. Very true. I've always defined trust from my Webster's dictionary here in beautiful Buffalo. It's defined in 3 ways. It's defined by your character. When people say, I trust David Elias, it's your overall character, meaning being reliable, being accountable, following up, the things like this, caring the way we talk about it right now. 2, it's defined by your integrity, that you're always going to do what's right on behalf of the people that you're privileged to serve. And 3, it's defined by your abilities, that you've got the talent, you got the skill, you got the expertise, but it's proven. You built mastery up in a 20-year timeline and many, many more years preceding that, as well as after that as well. And I loved it when we were out back then, because I sat next to you on many due diligence meetings where people would quiz us on, what were our standards for buying a stock, right, or selling it. And what you're talking about, the quality of the companies, management teams, the General Electrics of the world back then, they're going to be around, the Boeings, the ones that year after year were going to produce. The clients were comfortable with that. That led you to be very bullish. And I remember in building on your passion for writing and speaking, as you were forward thinking, and you published a significant book to the marketplace that everybody wanted to hear your perspectives. And I know they're calling you again now around Dow 40,000. You are way ahead of your time, way ahead of your time. And we're inching closer again. Why the heck is it taking so 25 years, David? What's disappointed you about not being able to get to this point you saw 2.5 decades ago?
The biggest thing, and this is not original with me, but we have a political economy and not an economic economy. I had too much faith and trust in that the elected officials in this country would do the right things. I'm a legitimate independent voter. Both sides of the aisle have disappointed me. Somebody said to me once, and you know, what would I look for in an elected official? I would like to find a statesperson, not a stateswoman or somebody that truly was there to serve our country. Maybe I was naive as younger and everything else, but I think of Jacob Javits, who was our state senator here in New York State. You had Frank Church out in Idaho. You had many other elected officials years ago when we were growing up. They truly cared about this country. Yeah. And I don't have that same sense with most of the elected officials in this country today. They waste so much time fighting amongst themselves. And if I could digress for a second, I was very fortunate. I sat on boards at the Kennedy School at Harvard, the Harris School at the University of Chicago. And one of our offshore board meetings was in Beijing, China. And 5 of the businessmen that were on our board were highly successful Chinese businessmen educated in the United States. USC, Stanford, Chicago, Michigan, and Harvard. And on different occasions, I asked them questions of what they saw for China in the next 25 to 30 years. This is back in 2008. Okay. Wow. And to the person, they said, we're going to dominate the world militarily and economically. And you and I have both talked about this before. There's a believing, there's a which are thinking, but there's a knowing. Each of them said it with a knowing. And I finally got to number 5, who got his master's MBA from the University of Michigan. I said, you and your contemporaries say it with such a knowing. Why? He says, because your President Lincoln said it better than anybody. A house divided cannot stand alone. As long as your 2 major parties continue to fight the way they are, we're going to do whatever we want. And it's gotten worse.
Yeah.
And so that's my biggest, because we should have hit 40,000 years ago, because the American spirit, the entrepreneurial spirit in this country is greater than anywhere else in the world.
You know, it's like knowing is confidence on steroids to me. It's like, we talk about, if you're convinced, then others could be convinced, right? You got to be convinced yourself first. Or if you believe, others will believe. But when you elevate it to like, we know it, that means that there's a vision, a culture, a dedicated commitment, that everybody is on the same page here. In this political economy, as you said, we're not on the same page. We can't get on the same page versus in economic economies we're talking about to do this. So frustrating. You're seeing it firsthand, and I know people are calling you and texting and emailing you to build off of what you just said here. So thanks for sharing that. That's really making everybody think more about this. So, hey, David, listen, at some point, you're 20 years in. Once you know it's time to move on, to sell, here you are, an entrepreneur. You obviously have some cues. You've learned from your experience. Curious how you'd advise other entrepreneurs who are considering selling for something that they built and were so passionate about, and moving on to the next part of their career. When did you know it was time?
It's interesting, Leo. On numerous occasions, we were approached by different organizations to be bought out. The first time I was approached was after the crash of '87 by a Wall Street firm. They wanted to buy us. And I said to myself, I'm going to take the Wayne Newton model. Wayne Newton was in serious financial conditions in his career. And a man named Howard Hughes came to him and offered to buy out and pay off all his debts and do all sorts of things for him if he would give him a lifetime contract. Wayne Newton turned it down. And the reason is, he said, if he's willing to do this for me, that means I'm worth a lot more money than he's offering me. And that's what, and so when we turned that down, and 4 or 5 other times we were approached to be bought out, and I just said no at that time. The last time that we were approached was 2 reasons, and they were because of people that you also knew. Grace Fay, who was with a firm in Boston, a good friend of ours, a competitor, and also David Como at Trainer Wortham, one of the oldest firms. And I remember I asked each of them about selling, and they said, we're not going to sell. Things are really good. We've had a long strike. And then a week later, Grace called me up and said to me, our firm just hired Oppenheimer to represent us. We're going to sell. And then David called me up and said, we're going to be selling also. I figured if these 2 firms, and I asked them why, they said, look, we've had so many good years. We're at a point now where the value of our firms, it's going to take a lot to take it any higher. And it was time to do it.
Yeah. So it's timing, valuation.
Right.
You knew, but I knowing you, so much of a people person, a caring person, a passionate person about the markets and about investing and financial planning and wealth and helping people achieve goals through not just your inspiration and positivity, but you got back in, you jumped back into the asset management business after some introspection. In retrospect, were you too young to retire? Did you know you could still make a difference in helping others? What was going through your mind when you re-entered the world of investment management after successfully selling your own enterprise?
Well, what's interesting about that is that I was 63 at the time. We had a beautiful condo overlooking the ocean from down in Jupiter, Florida. I belonged to a golf club. And after about 6 weeks of that, I said to Barbara, I said, I like the game of golf, but I don't love it. I couldn't play it every day. I was bored and I missed the action. And I was getting calls from different people asking me about this, that, and everything else. And Barbara said to me, she says, you got to do something. And our mutual friend, Jim Gould, and I, for years, even though we were competitors for about 25 years, always said we wanted to work together. He called me up and he says, David, he said, Barbara told me that you're really not enjoying your retirement. How would you like to become a part of Valesco? And I said, when can I start? He said, when would you like to? How about tomorrow? And literally a couple of weeks later, I sold the condo, resigned from the golf club, and went back to work with Valesco Advisors. And that was probably, if you want to call it the icing on the cake, that was probably some of the best years in the business. Jim is somebody of high value and incredible integrity. Todd Green, one of the senior partners there, unbelievably knowledgeable, gifted, and just a great organization. And to this day, even though I'm not an employee there, I still go out on some of the calls. They call me to help them out with some of the clients that I brought there. And we still have a wonderful rapport. And it's the only firm I can tell you right now. And I know a lot of people in the business that I still would refer business to.
Yeah, I would echo that. Again, this is a podcast talking about you and your life and business journey, whatever. But for those people to listen in on a podcast that I did with our good friend Jim Gould, absolutely one of the finest, world-class entrepreneurs, amazing thinkers, caring, living his values in the asset management world. Couldn't say enough nice things about Jim and the team he's built at Valesco as well. So that went for a period of time, and it's nice to see how things have gone since even a departure formally from that organization. But what never left you was people wanting to seek you out for your guidance, for your mentorship. Affectionately known as Rabbi David to some, or Father David, you're constantly talking to people, mentoring people. I can see you at that corner table at the Country Club of Buffalo, and people seeking out your advice and and inspiration. How does that bring a smile to your heart and soul? Because you're always there to listen, to help, to challenge, to uplift people. People always feel better being around you. They're always invigorated, and it's just part of who you are. Tell me how that affects you as well.
Well, you and I both know this, and you walk in the same shoes that I walk in. We've both have had a lot of mentorship. We've had a lot of people that have helped us along the way. We weren't the Lone Ranger. We didn't do it on our own. Jack Connell, who was my mentor for a number of years, and I say this with a great deal of respect and obviously a little twinkle in my eye when I say this, he had everything you would want. He had a private jet. He had beautiful homes in 3 different parts of the country. And I said to him one day, I said, how do I pay you back for the countless hours of mentoring that you've given me? Because you've got everything anybody can possibly want. He says, I'm going to only ask you to do one thing, pass it on. When somebody comes and said, I need your help, and he says, I want you to also, even if an enemy comes to you, turn the other cheek and help that person. Yeah. And that's where it comes from. And quite frankly, Leo, I'm going to be 79 this year, and I'm going to brag a little bit here. I'm busier today than I was 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and I've been very blessed with young people to help them along and watch them pass it on. I'm currently a volunteer with the Secret Service. I've been doing this for a number of years, and some of the young agents for me, young agents are in their 40s. To see what they're doing to help pass it on. So that's the greatest pleasure and everything else. And if anybody ever said to me, if there's only one word that I could have on my tombstone, is that David Elias cared.
Yeah. Well, let's bring that to conclusion. One thing from what Jack taught you about, in my words as well, paying it forward. And we were privileged to have you fly out to Arizona to participate in something near and dear to my heart as I was launching my sabbatical experience, helping successful leaders to think about the next 5 to 25 years of their lives, their careers, their journeys, to surround themselves with like-minded individuals, to put our collective arms around each other, to give each other high fives, but also to maybe share a tear with each other as well. And in this paying it forward aspect, one of the elements of our experience, as you remember, was living a life of significance and a life with no regrets and a life with abundance and gratitude and perspective, being your best and living your legacy. You're all about all of those principles, especially abundance, which is about giving your time, giving your talent, and giving your treasure to help people in need, which I know you have done. Selectively and things that are near and dear to your heart, Barbara's heart, and things like this. That whole paying it forward thing, I'm just curious, when you think back about being around, you were literally around like 20 other David Eliases in one way, shape, or form, younger, older, all talking together regarding our lives and things. What is there something that to this day still impacts your thinking about some of those principles and how you're trying to embed them into your life on a day-to-day basis?
I'm going to just say in a couple of different ways to respond to that. One, when I'm having a bad hair day, I'll sit down and take a few deep breaths, and I visualize the time there. I've thought about Michael Jackson when he did the recording of We Are the World. We had some of the greatest artists in the world there. And there was a big sign on the recording studio door before you walked in. Check your door, ego at the door, or don't come in. I've never been in a situation before or since like what I experienced there. All I could think of, my inner voice was singing We Are Family by Sister Sledge. Every single person there, without exception, had no ego. They came in there when they shared their experiences, like everybody has something in their lives that has been a major challenge, whether it be health, family, finances, and everything else. And to share with such honesty, openness, which just was incredible. There was absolutely no judgment at all. And also, there was a family, a love for one another, a respect for one another, and an admiration for one another. And I felt that, like I said, all I could think is we are family. And that all starts with the head of the family, with you, Leo, was setting the tone for it. Also, think of the beautiful blue skies, the sunshine, the gorgeous and magnificent mountains in the background. One of the things that Shakespeare once said, he felt one of the great reasons the Greeks had so many incredible ideas is the blue skies they had there, where there wasn't clouds overhanging or anything else. You could think clearly, and you could see for miles and miles. That it was there. I mean,
Yeah.
everything was picture perfect.
Yeah. Well, David, I can't thank you enough for your time, for your friendship. We're going on close to 4 decades now of how long and when we first met. And that was it ominous? I don't know if that's the right word, or prescient, or just
Why don't you tell
serendipitous.
me?
Serendipitous. If
It
the
was
Syracuse airport, was it when you run in and you say, I was just, we run into each other 1988. You said, I was just thinking of you, and I'm thinking, yeah, sure. Hold on a second, Leo. Hold on a second. You're fumbling around, whatever. You pull out of your pocket, and all of a sudden there's a piece of paper and it says, call Leo Pusateri. I said, oh, you got me on that one, brother.
And you were in, you remember I walked into a restaurant, it was in Syracuse, New York.
Yeah, he said Syracuse.
And there you were.
Well, I put up my hand with 5 fingers. A lot of people say that if you can live your life, if you think about, there's probably a few people in your life that have truly made a difference and impacted your life. When I hold up my 5 fingers, you're one of these fingers, my friend. When people look at me right now and say, Leo, who are some of the people that have impacted your career, your journey, your direction, the type of individual you are, the values that you lead? You're one of the people in my life. And I've been wanting to do this interview and podcast with you for, quite honestly, a couple of years now. We've been talking about this, and timing hasn't been right due to some reasons. And I can't thank you enough for sharing your insight and wisdom, your business beliefs, your experiences with all the listeners today, David. Love you dearly as a true brother and a mentor. Thank you so much.